Greetings. In this video, we're going to be discussing the contract to lease form for residential properties. The contract to lease form is used in most situations when a tenant is going to be placing an offer on a prospective property that they're looking to rent. As it says here at the top of the form, this is not a lease. A lease should be signed before occupancy. So once again, the contract to lease form that we're going to be discussing in this video is most of the time used for just placing an offer onto a property just to get the initial negotiations started when a tenant is looking to occupy and start renting a particular property. Before we get into the video, I'd like to take a brief moment to just discuss about our company for anyone who is new to this channel and hasn't seen any of our other videos. Nizz Realty Incorporated is a 100% commission real estate brokerage. We pay realtors 100% of their real estate commission, and we have $0 agent fees. The only fee that we charge is a transaction fee upon closing a deal. And we let you decide that transaction fee amount because we feel the proper way to do business is to keep you happy and to let you decide what you feel is a reasonable amount to be paying your brokerage per transaction. For more information, feel free to view the description below, visit our website at nizzrealty.com, or feel free to give us a call or email us. For now, let's get into this video and talk about the contract to lease. So in the beginning here, you're going to be filling out the landlord and tenant's name. So let's start by putting something there as a placeholder. We'll say John Doe is going to be the landlord. And let's say the particular tenant is going to be Billy Bob today. The next part here is you're discussing about when to execute a lease agreement no later than a specified date. Let's say this document, we want the lease to be entered in no later than, let's say the 20th of November. So basically, no later than the 20th of November will a lease be executed, and the tenant will move into the property. You really put whatever date that you want here that the tenant is going to be looking to occupy the premises. The next part here is the check marks of discussing who is going to be preparing the lease. Most of the time it's the landlord. If it's going to be the tenant and the tenant's listing, real estate agent, real estate broker, then you could click this and they'll prepare the actual lease contract for the tenant. Most of the time, usually you click the landlord, or you could even leave this blank. Me personally, I recommend you always fill out everything if you can. Never leave anything blank. So we're going to click the landlord and move on to the next part. And for those watching the video, they could just view what's happening here on the screen and just click things as they see when they're entering this contract and filling it out. The next paragraph discusses about the deposit. So let's say the tenant has paid let's make it easy, a $1,000 deposit to the deposit holder. This is whoever is going to be holding the deposit. A lot of the times it's if the landlord has a real estate broker, the real estate broker has a escrow account. For example, our real estate brokerage, Nizz Realty Incorporated, we have an escrow account for you to use for any of your transactions, so the tenant could pay the deposit or the real estate commission into our escrow accounts, and let's say that Nizz Realty Inc. is going to be holding this particular deposit. So it's been paid to Nizz Realty Inc. We have separate forms for when we're going to receive a deposit. We have other videos discussing about that, but for right now, let's just fill this out and move on to the next paragraph, that Nizz Realty is going to be holding the deposit of $1,000 from the tenant. The property address, you just put the full property address here. Make sure it's the full address. I know it may sound silly, but a lot of times the realtors, they don't put the full address, or whoever's filling out this particular form, they'll miss the city or they'll leave out the zip code. That's completely unacceptable. I know it may sound a little silly, but I have seen it many times. Fill out the complete address. Make sure you have the full number, the name of the street, or whatever it is, drive, street, circle, and make sure you fill out the city, state, and zip. It's completely unacceptable to not fill it out any other way. It's really simple. So we'll say that we got everyone got this right, and we're going to move on. Next part is discussing if the property is furnished or unfurnished. If it's furnished, you'll click here, attach an inventory. You could say something like, say in the next paragraph, the property will be used for only residential purposes and occupied by only tenant and the following persons. You could attach an inventory here. We'll get to this next line in a second. So if you have an inventory of furniture and maybe it's being rented with, beds, TVs, couches, tables, perhaps kitchen equipment. Maybe there's, plates, knives, different appliances like, maybe a toaster oven, microwave. You just attach an inventory and fill it out there. For this particular property, let's say it's completely unfurnished and there's no furniture included. The next part is if the tenant has any other occupants. Most of the time, you put anyone else there. Maybe they have a brother or a relative living with them. Someone else is going to be living there. Most of the time, if they are and they're over the age of 18, you usually put them up here with the tenant because most situations, individuals are splitting the rent, or they want all of their names on the lease. So you put all their names up here next to, let's say, Billy Bob had someone else that he's roommating with or going to be living with, maybe his wife or a relative. You just put that there, but if not, you could put it down here, that if they just have someone accompanying them, maybe staying with them, perhaps they're not paying the rent. It's a pretty simple line here. You just fill it out. A lot of times if they have children under the age of 18, I usually don't put it here. Sometimes, if the tenant and the landlord want their names there, you could put it there. It's really not too important. If there's additional people, fill them out up here as the tenant, but you can put them here. For right now, let's just say it's only Billy Bob, and this line is not applicable. We'll just fill that out to not leave it blank. Next part is the lease and when it's going to begin. You could, let's say we set up here, it's going to begin on the 20th. So let's say it started on the 20th of November. We're going to say this is a 1-year lease. So the right way to do this is to have it expire 1 day prior. So it would be the 19th of 2021, November. As discussed in many of the other videos, a lot of realtors make this mistake by putting the 20th here. That's actually the incorrect way to do it. It's supposed to expire 1 day prior, so the 19th at midnight, not exactly the 20th, because this is just the right way to do it. It's not supposed to be until the 20th of next year. So something to take note of. If you want to do this the proper way, it starts on this date, and you always go 1 day backwards. So in this particular example, the 19th, 2021 at midnight is when the lease expires if it's a 1-year contract. Next part, we're going to discuss the money due before occupancy. The tenant will pay a sum of, you fill in whatever number here that's in accordance with this paragraph. Let's say the first month's rent plus applicable taxes. Let's say the monthly rent's $1,000. So we'll put $1,000 there. Our realtor software fills it in automatically up here as we fill it out. We're going to say this is due on the date of move-in, the 20th. Let's say advance rent for the month of, a lot of times realtors or landlords, they want advance rent. The next paragraph is discussing the last month's rent. Maybe they want additional rent for, an additional month. You could fill that out here. For right now, we're just going to leave this part blank. Let's say our landlord only wants to receive the last month's rent. So that's $1,000. Due on the 20th. A security deposit. We said that is $1,000. If you want to change the different due date, you could change this. Most of the time, it's just left at the 20th because they're already holding the deposit in escrow. So you just have the deposit, be transferred to the landlord on the date of move-in. If there's a security deposit for the association, if there's a condominium association or a homeowners association, you fill this out here. Sometimes this association requires an additional deposit. If they do, usually the tenant will pay this. Sometimes the landlord does. Let's say in this particular situation, there is an association and they do want a deposit of, let's say, $500 during the term of the lease. So you put that there. Let's say that's due on the whatever date that it's going to be due on for the association. Let's just say the 20th. Pet deposit, if there is any. In this particular contract, we're going to say there's no pets involved, so we're going to leave that blank, and anything additional down here written in the other. For right now, we'll leave this blank, and we'll move on to the next paragraph because there's nothing else additional we're going to do with this contract as far as deposits and rent being due. As you see, it's been updated here, and this is the total move-in costs for the tenant because they have to pay the first month's rent, last month's rent, security deposit, and a $500 association fee or deposit for security, and that comes out to $3,500. The next part is the paragraph 2 deposit will be credited as follows. So this is talking about the initial deposit of $1,000 that was made up here, or whatever you do decide to put as this number. It could be credited to, let's say it's going to go to the security deposit, so it could go to that. Let's say it's going to be the first month's rent. You could put that there. Or sometimes what I like to put is you could put the realtor commission. So you could put $1,000 here, and then you could write realtor commissions, something like that. You could also just leave it as the first month's rent, and in the contract to lease that you're gonna, or the actual lease contract that you fill out, you could write your commission there, and you know, the first month's rent will be split. So it really just depends on how you want to put it here. For this particular video, we could just write that it's written as other for realtor commissions. And we'll move on to the next paragraph. So the next paragraph discusses rent payments, taxes, and charges. Tenant will pay total rent for the lease term of, this is the total amount that they're going to be paying. If they're going to be paying taxes, usually that's not involved unless it's a seasonal rental and they're paying the taxes on it, which I usually have never seen, but I guess they can. So we'll leave that blank here. Let's say it's a 12-month lease, so it's going to be $12,000. The tenant will pay rent, including taxes applicable, and full on the amount here, or if it's going to be monthly. You could click usually monthly they're paying it. If they want the money to be received on the first day of each month, they can. For this particular contract, they're moving in on the 20th, so I like to make it that the rent is due on the 20th, so you don't have to prorate anything. You know, it just makes it a lot easier. So for this particular contract, we're going to say that it's paid monthly and it's due on the 20th day of each month in the amount of $1,000. Pets. We're going to say pets are prohibited in this particular contract. If they are permitted, you could write permitted and as described what type of pet they may have. If they have a service animal, obviously there's laws that protect them against that, so you can't prohibit that. But in this particular contract, let's just say there's no service animals and they don't have any pets and the landlord doesn't want any pets, so we'll just say prohibited. Smoking, prohibited on the premises. You mark that out as the landlord likes. Utilities. This is discussing what's included in the rent. The tenant will pay for all utility services during the lease term. Connection charges and deposits for activating existing utility connections to the property, except for whatever the case may be, which landlord agrees to provide at landlord's expense. Let's say the association includes water and sewer and trash removal, then that's paid in the monthly maintenance fee for the association. It's covered by the landlord, so let's just say water, sewer, and trash removal is included. You put whatever is included here, covered by the landlord, and you know it changes from contract to contract depending on what's covered and what's not. Next paragraph is about maintenance. The landlord will be responsible for maintenance and repair of the property except for whatever you're going to put there that the tenant agrees to maintain and repair. Most of the time I've seen landlords, they take care of everything unless it's over a certain amount of, you know, if it's under a certain amount of money. Let's say if the repairs are under $100, then usually the tenant's responsible for it, but once something exceeds $100, maybe the refrigerator breaks and the repair cost is over $100, then the landlord will have to take care of that. But if it's, you know, like a small light bulb or something like that, that costs like $5, $10, the tenant's required to take care of that. But you could fill this paragraph to say that, you know, the tenant's responsible for taking care of something else. We're not going to put anything here, so we're just going to say the landlord It's taking care of everything. The tenant doesn't agree to, maintain or repair anything major, but maybe the landlord doesn't want to be responsible for taking care of, let's say, the oven. Let's say the oven is something that the landlord wants the tenant completely responsible for. This really never happens. I've never seen situations like that, but they could say that and put this in the contract, and if the tenant agrees to it, then they're responsible for taking care of that. Maybe the water heater. It really depends. For this contract, we're just going to leave it at non-applicable. We'll just put that there, and the landlord's going to take care of pretty much all the repairs. Next paragraph is talking about association approval. Where applicable, the lease will be contingent upon condominium, cooperative, or homeowners association approval. You write here usually who's going to pay the application fee. Most of the time it's the tenant. If the landlord's going to pay it, by all means click the landlord, but for this particular contract and how I usually see it, the tenant's going to pay the application fee of, let's say it's $100. That's usually what I see. And make application for the association approval by whatever date. Let's say they need to make an application by, let's say they want that to be done by the 13th, something early, so they can move into the property at a reasonable time. Usually the associations can take like 30 days to approve your application, but let's, for this example, say this is a good association. They usually only take a few days. They're pretty quick with it. So we'll just say they apply by the 13th to get things moving. That's it for that paragraph. You fill this out in accordance with who's paying and the date that you want them to apply. The next paragraph is additional terms. You fill this out if there's any additional terms or if attorney has to get involved and so forth for this particular contract. Let's just say non-applicable. Just move on to the next. Let's say there's nothing fancy being done here. It's a pretty standard contract. The next paragraph is discussing, the credit background check. If landlord determines the tenant's background, it's nothing to fill out here. This is just pretty much a disclosure. If the tenant's background is not acceptable for the landlord, the credit, which is really up to the landlord and so forth. We'll move on to the next paragraph. You can fill this out if you'd like. If the tenant is a service member as defined in Florida Statute 250.01. I believe this is talking about if the tenant is a member of the military or something like that. I'm not exactly too sure what Florida Statute 250.01 is. I believe this paragraph is talking about if the the tenant is a service member, which is usually something along the lines of military, army, something along in the service for the country. So you can fill this out as need be. Right now we're just going to leave this be. The next paragraph is just talking about failure to perform. There's nothing to fill out here. The next paragraph is talking about brokers. You fill out your names here. If you're representing the tenant or the landlord, the brokerage name, the real estate agent's name. We're just going to skip these for right now. You'll fill this out in accordance. It's pretty important to put your name here so if you're involved in this contract and do your compensation. It's definitely good to put somewhere in the actual lease contract the amount of your commission so that you have it in writing what exactly is being paid. For right now, we'll skip that. As it says here, this is pretty important. You got to remember, this is the contract to lease form. This is not an actual lease. There's a separate document and video that we have discussing those actual residential leases for a single family or for a unit in like a condominium. Those are the actual lease contracts that you could use to fill out to have the actual lease. This is usually, like I said in the beginning of this video, a contract to put in an initial offer for the tenants on a property. Let's say you're showing a particular condo unit, the tenant likes it, they want to put an offer in. A lot of times landlords don't want a verbal offer, they want something in writing. That's when you use this contract to lease. This is an excellent tool to use to place in that initial offer. So you'd fill this out to get basically everything in writing on what's looking to be done, and then you send this over, and then if things transition into an actual lease, then you sign the actual lease contract and fill out that document. This is just used for usually the initial offer. So this is the end of the contract. You just pretty much have the tenant sign and date. It's pretty important. Put their address if they want, telephone, email number. That's good to fill this out for, communication purposes. Same with the landlord. Make sure all the landlords and tenants sign and date and put their information here. It's pretty important. And also, a lot of times, many tenants and landlords and realtors forget that you have to have everyone initial each page at the bottom. I see this missed out a lot, and it's completely unacceptable. They'll miss out maybe on page 2, and all the other pages will be initialed. It's unacceptable. Have the tenant initial and the landlord initial each page, and make sure they sign and date at the end of the contract here. And we did skip over this. I've been thinking about the service member. You could fill this out just because I don't like to leave anything blank. And you could let's just say no. But you could fill this out in accordance with how you're doing your contract and the situation you have. That's pretty much it for the contract to lease. Once again, remember, this isn't the actual lease contract. This is mostly used just for placing an offer. It says here at the top. Hopefully this video was helpful, and we'll see you in the next one. Thank you.